number one blind spot that I find that people right now have that I talk to is robots. And nobody understands how quick robots are advancing. Like, I saw somebody yesterday post that old meme from like a couple years ago that was like, I want robots to, make my bed and do my laundry or do my dishes, not make my images and write my stories or whatever. And then the post right next to it was an advertisement from a robot store, and the video was a robot doing dishes. So the person's posting, I want a robot that does dishes, and then right next to it is an advertisement with a robot doing dishes in it. So we're not using the AI to do the creation, we're having it do kind of the legwork after the fact. We write articles for a company, and we post those articles. We don't really use AI to write them because it's a very specific subject. AI doesn't know enough about it to be useful in that way. We might use it for some drafting and stuff, but we pretty much are just writing it, old school writing, and then we post it. But then we got to take that article and I got to post it post on like Twitter and Blue Sky and all these threads and whatever else. So all I'm really doing is summarizing the article, grabbing the link, grabbing the photo, and putting those into, posting software or whatever. So instead, I just use the automation tool. The automation tool checks every few hours to see if a blog's been posted on that website. And if it has, it automatically summarizes it, automatically grabs the photo and the link, puts it in the right length and format, and posts it to each of those platforms. And there's no human involved in that task. But it's still human content. We wrote it, right? We've come so far so fast that people don't know that the thing that they're complaining about already exists. Figure out what the things that you need to get done that are going to make a difference in your business or make a difference in your life, and then go and try and find a way or search around, see if somebody's already figured out a way to use the AI to do that thing, and then do that thing. Yeah, you don't need permission to figure this stuff out, especially if you work for a large organization. It is only going to make you more valuable to the organization if you know how to use some AI tools. Play with it, mess with it, figure it out. That's the best way to do it. And don't forget that if you're talking to a chatbot that knows pretty much everything in the world, you can always ask it how to get better at using it.
Hello, and welcome back to Is This New Internet? We are in episode 16, and I am joined by someone who I've met a few times in person. We got along really, really well at PodCamp Toronto. He's had me on his show twice, and now it's finally my turn to have him on mine. Please welcome Matt Rouse. Matt is a fantastic digital marketer. He has his own agency in Nova Scotia. He is a tech nerd. He's been in the tech space for the longest time. He's seen tech grow from this niche nerd curiosity into something that everyone uses, everyone relies on for every single aspect of their lives. Matt has a ton of insights. This is an episode that I've been looking forward to for a long time. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, Matt. How's
Thanks,
it going?
Marv. It's good to see you again.
Likewise. So it was amazing meeting you at PodCamp the first time. It was my first major podcasting event. You sort of noticed me in the bar when we were chatting with a whole bunch of folks who all kind of seem to already know each other. So I really appreciate you, being super approachable, really chilled out. And we vibed immediately on like nerdy tech stuff. Like you got the whole crypto side of me out immediately within a couple of questions. And yeah, so could you tell the folks a little bit about you, just to get this conversation started a little bit? What's the 101 of Matt Rouse?
I'm Matt Rouse. I live in Nova Scotia. I'm sort of like a part-time tech person, marketing person / homesteader. We've got a couple big gardens and 46 chickens, and I got 48 more eggs in the incubator right now. And my wife and my daughter were like candling eggs last night to see if they're viable. And, so we get to do that kind of fun stuff where you're kind of living in, and I wouldn't say it's remote, but I mean, it is kind of the middle of nowhere where we live. There's not a whole lot of people or anything around. Almost hit some deer on the way to drop my kid off at school this morning. And, but on the technical side, I run Hook Digital Marketing in the United States as well as Hook Digital Marketing Canada. and I work with some other startups, and I'm in some kind of business and agency networking groups and stuff like that. So I also teach introduction to AI for work and business locally for like Nova Scotia Works, which is like for people who are trying to find a job or they're trying to improve their businesses. And like I spoke at PodCamp Toronto twice about the state of AI in 2026.
Nice. And I think I attended both of your talks on AI, and the talk you did last year and the talk you did this year. It was amazing how much the space has moved, in just a short year. So could you tell the folks a little bit about, your current journey in AI?
Now, I don't like write AI software. I write software that utilizes existing AI systems, but I'm not like an AI developer, right? However, I have a general understanding of how AI works, and I think I have a very good understanding of the differences between different foundational models and other pieces of software, as well as the differences in how those models can be used. And that comes from the experience of basically trying to get everything you can out of every different AI system and having good ways to test them and trying to find use cases for that stuff that we can use in our business. And our businesses, because we're essentially a fractional marketing department. So if you're a company, you're a manufacturer, you're a mom and pop shop, whatever, and you don't have a marketing staff, we could be your marketing department if you can't afford a marketing staff, like just for your own company. Or we augment if somebody has like one or two marketing staff, but they're not experts in, say, meta ads or something like that, right? Then we would come do that thing for them. So we have a lot of different stuff we can do. And that allows us a lot of different ways to test AI systems that we can use for ourselves and our team to work on. And we're also building a SaaS product that's not released yet. And we have software developer, like a trained software developer on staff as well.
Nice, nice. So there's a lot of talk currently, especially in LinkedIn circles, about how AI is super transformative for businesses, how everyone sort of has to like get some sort of an AI like aspect into like their operations. Because I know I have my listeners, some of them are quite skeptical about AI. Some of them use AI every single day. Some maybe want to use AI but don't know where to get started. And if you're spending any time on LinkedIn, you would see that it's either do this now or forever get left behind. Do you have any takes on, the urgency with which AI is being pushed currently? And as someone who uses it, do you have any immediate responses to that?
So you kind of get two things from people on the internet about AI. Either everything is happening so fast, you have to use it because it's amazing. If you don't do it now, you're going to get left behind and you're going to be poor and destitute. Or AI is terrible, a theft machine that steals everybody's intellectual property, uses up all the water, and we're all going to be stupid and bankrupt. And so those two opposites they just don't work, right? Um, it's kind of like the same idea when ChatGPT came out originally, and like 6 months later, every newspaper was like, AI is going to kill us all, but AI is also worthless and makes everything up. Like, which one is it? Like, there's this dichotomy going on. I think if you have repeatable tasks that need some sort of intelligence built into those tasks, so you can't just straight up automate them algorithmically, then you need to be using AI. If you have maybe something that can be done relatively quicker by using AI based software, maybe that's image generation, could be computer vision, it could be, video generators, social media stuff. There's all kinds of things, right? Then those are worth exploring. And as long as that matches the output that your customer is expecting or that, matches your brand, then that's great. There's also maybe kind of a third bucket there, which is stuff we wouldn't do because it would be too expensive to do if we didn't have AI, but because AI, we can do that thing. So a good example of that would be a small business cannot have a giant photo shoot on a mountainside with all their products next to a stream, running down the side of the mountain because they can't afford a photographer, and let alone on site shooting somewhere, right? But they can make that with an AI program, for 30, $40 a month. They can afford that. So that's AI is not taking someone's job in that case. It is a job that would not exist. So I think that bucket is also something people should consider. What are the things that I would do, if it were possible, and then seeing if those things are possible.
Nice. And I think I've noticed this a lot because I spend quite a lot of time in like independent and underground music setups. And these are not exactly communities that are flush with cash. So and paying people that would probably be an expensive photographer or an expensive designer to like make flyers and stuff. You need a flyer every single week. And if you're barely making a couple of $100 profit in each event, all that can go straight to a designer, or you can probably save a little, build a little. And I know a lot of people might not like it, but you cannot squeeze like juice from a stone because like, there's simply no funding there. So I totally understand the perspective from small and medium business owners. And I do think that when you talk about your clients, what's the sort of breakdown like? How many of them are going to be like enterprise scale versus smaller businesses? And do you see any differences in perceptions on AI in these tools within these groups of people?
Yeah, we're not working with any enterprise size clients right now. We have in the past. We used to do some work with Intel and Nike, and I worked at those places, which is how we got those contacts in the first place. But right now, I would say our general client is anywhere from, a few 100,000 to like, tens of millions in revenue somewhere. And I know that's a pretty large range. But we have, a couple companies with several hundred employees, and we have a bunch of companies that we work with that are like one person. I think that the AI use is very, very random. A lot of people want to use it. They kind of don't know where to start. Small businesses specifically, the person running the business, like almost always, they have so many tasks to do that they cannot possibly get them all done by the end of the week, and they don't have time to figure out how to automate something which would save them the time to be able to do more things. So they're stuck in this sort of catch-22, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Another thing that we see a lot is people using very kind of simple use cases, which would be like, okay, I'm going to upload this PDF and give me a summary of what's in my insurance document, kind of simple chatbot stuff. A lot of that, I mean, yes, it's a time-saving thing, but you need something more if you're really going to get any kind of long-term productivity gain. I think a good example for us is we had a client who wanted a video where, they have to explain something. It's very technical. It's coming from medical research people for doctors specifically, not actually oncologists, so a specific type of doctor. Motion graphic companies and stuff, we're looking at, over $10,000 per video. They need 13 of them in 2 languages. It's a lot of work, right? But they also don't have, $300,000 in their pocket. So, we were able to break these tasks down and say, okay, well, what are all the pieces? Can we use an AI voice, right? And so we ended up using an AI avatar dressed as a doctor, right? And they were fine with it because it's just an explainer video. It's not like part of their brand. It's just going to go to their existing customers to explain something. And then we had motion graphics and things like that we needed to make. So we were able to use a combination of stock photography and then custom labeling photos, like this is this, this is their liver and this is this or whatever. And then making first frame, last frame in kind of 5 to 8 second chunks, and then using like VL3 or Kling or Seed Dream or something to animate between those. And then who were kind of manually doing the video editing and putting it together. But all said and done, that whole process takes that video from, $10 to $15,000 to like $1,000. And so the cost of our AI empowered employee making all of those videos is less than it would have been the cost of one. So yeah, we're undercutting someone else to do that job with AI, but they wouldn't have been able to afford to do that had they had to pay another company to do it. And I think here's the lesson of just that one thing is that if you can empower your staff, yourself, your employees, whoever it is you work with, your team, if they can be empowered with AI tools that can give them real time savings, then now that brings down the cost. It makes a lot of things more possible, than they were before. A lot of things are unreachable, especially to small businesses or to entrepreneurs because of the cost.
Yeah, and small businesses are very cost sensitive. As someone who's had my own small shop for a while, like it became a point of, okay, you can probably afford to spend a lot more on something, but then do you really want to? Because if you're a small shop, you got to keep your costs down. It is about that short-term survival while trying to reach all of your goals. So I completely understand that. And you did mention your history, and I'm going to wind it back a little bit. You used to work with Intel. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started in this space? Like, what was the origin story like?
We're going back pretty far.
Goes back as far as you like, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in your past, especially when it comes to a show about the new internet.
Right?
You've seen a lot about the internet that I idealized almost. So could you tell us a little bit about
A pre-internet internet.
the pre-internet internet, like the internet where there were actually websites beyond social media and stuff? There's a lot of really cool experiences that you'd have had.
I mean, the
That
pre-internet. Why don't we go all the way back?
we
I'll
can
tell
go
you.
back as far as you like.
I can tell you the moment that I decided that I wanted to do stuff with computers.
Yes,
I had
please.
an
Yes,
uncle of
please.
mine. We were visiting in Ontario when I was a kid. I was 8 years old, and we played this game that was called Gangbusters, and it was on a Radio Shack TRS-80 computer. And they, you should look up that computer, the TRS-80, sometime. It is like even a modern like light switch has more processing power than this thing, right? So, but anyways, it was this game where you take turns at the computer and you have to like run this like mob boss thing of like, how many protection rackets are you doing and all this stuff. And then, it was totally not appropriate for my age, but it didn't have any graphics or anything. Everything was text back then. Uh, anyway, I was enthralled, right, with this computer that could do these things. And, I had a friend who had an Atari 2600 game system where you put the cartridge in the top and you could play around and move your little pixelated thing around the screen and pretend that that was actually a person or a dragon or something. Anyway, I got my first computer for Christmas that same year. Our family got a computer. And after that, I started getting a magazine called CompuServe, and that was the Canadian computer magazine. And in the back of it, it would have pages and pages and pages of code that you could type into the computer. So if you wanted to write a program, you would type in the program because there was no internet, right? So a few years later, I discovered bulletin board systems. Bulletin board systems, you would dial in. So you would use a phone modem and you would dial in. It was super slow. You could read the words as they came on the screen. That's how slow it was. But bulletin board systems were the predecessor to the modern internet software because there were multi-line bulletin board systems, which then had multi-user games. Right? This was MUD was what they used to be called. It was the predecessor to like MMO games, and MUD was multi-user dungeon. That's what it was called. So it was everybody who was into computers was a nerd, played Dungeons and Dragons, played MUDs on BBS systems. And then from there was Usenet, and Usenet was essentially Reddit. It was like threaded posts, but there was servers all over the world. Most of them were at universities or colleges. And every night they would kind of go back and forth with each other and kind of update what was in those forums. And that was the predecessor to the internet, right? Um, and I was selling personal computers for a while in the 90s. I started out selling like car stereos and stuff, and computers and personal electronics. And then I went to do tech support when cable modems came out. And they couldn't get enough support people because no one had computers back then, right? And so, anyways, I started out in technical support for cable modem internet because cable internet was so fast compared to dial up, everybody was switching to cable. And then, kind of a long story short, I left that job because I was offered a contract job in the United States at Intel. And back then, it was the gold rush of the internet. So 2001, I packed everything up, sold off everything else I owned, and I moved to Oregon, a place called the Hillsboro, which they call the Silicon Forest because all the silicon companies are there to make chips. And I worked for Intel, and back and forth. I actually ended up working for Intel 6 times as a contractor at separate, departments and stuff. Nike was in Beaverton, which was the town next to Hillsboro, and I worked at Nike several times as a contractor. I worked on a bunch of systems. And as, the internet was kind of growing through that time frame, I would say the internet went pretty much hard corporate with the invention of social media. So it was both the invention of the search engine and then social media, and those two things kind of collided. And then the network effect started to take over, and people started to make these walled gardens of software, where previous to that, everyone had a website, and your website was anything you wanted it to be. There was no even any way to censor anything. It was a free for all, right? Like in the 90s on the internet, it was a serious free for all. Like you could literally find anything. But the problem was finding anything because there was only directories.
Yes, that's actually what I wanted to ask you about. Like, how did you have to meet people in person kind of to tell them about these sites that you were building, these services you were building? How did the information flow work back then?
There was a lot of people would email stuff. Like, I think this is something you don't see now. But like in the 90s, when you had an email address and you had some friends, you would ask, like, do you have an email? Because not everybody had an email, right? And they'd be like, yes. He'd be like, oh, well, you know what? I have 10 or 15 people I send every week. I send them what I find on the internet kind of thing. And you're just typing in their email addresses. You don't even have an address book. You're just whatever. And then you would get these apps. There was one in particular that was great, a messaging app that was called ICQ. And that kind of replaced everybody's AOL Instant Messenger. And everybody's on ICQ. There wasn't all this stuff about music. There was no Spotify. You just pirated music all the time because nobody was in charge of it. Record companies didn't even care back then. I think one of the funnier things was that you could get this broadcasting software, but nobody had nobody had enough bandwidth to have your own personal radio station or anything. But we worked for the cable company, so we had all the bandwidth we wanted. So we would set up servers on old computers in our house with all of our pirated stuff and make our own radio stations. And one of the guys we used to work with, actually, this was in 1999. He had essentially a cell phone scanner. So it would listen in to unencrypted cell phone calls, and he put it on his kind of radio server and broadcast it. So we'd sit at work all night when we're not on the phone with tech support and just listen to random people's cell phone conversations. And in between, there would be music spliced into it. So it was anything goes on the internet back in the late 90s and the early 2000s.
Nice, nice. So you say ICQ. I vaguely know ICQ. That was like kind of my entrance was totally MSN Messenger and the
Right.
Messenger days. Like even in India, we didn't really have AOL in a very big way, but MSN Messenger was kind of the start of it. And I think for you, that kind of was the start of the walled gardens of it, I guess, as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that you could collect all the user data. As soon as Google, and Facebook figured out that the game was data, the game was not necessarily like serving your users. It was how can you harvest the information from the users? Things changed, took a weird turn after that.
Yeah, yes. So could you tell me what parts of that internet do you really miss? If we could recreate anything today with all these tools, like if you could kind of wave a magic wand and all these wall gardens kind of went away, but making the most of the bandwidth we have right now and the amount of people online that we have right now, what would you like to see come back?
I think there was a lot of kind of art and stuff being created for the sake of doing it, and there was no gatekeeper to doing that. But of course, you also have the rise of other stuff that probably needs a gatekeeper, like things that are illegal. Um, the early internet, people were like the thought process was different, right? It was if you were on the internet, you had to be able to afford a computer for one. You had to be able to afford a connection to the internet, and computers were not cheap then. And also, you kind of had to be a tech nerd, right? Like you had to be fairly educated to be able to just use the internet at all. It wasn't easy. There was places like AOL and stuff that had internet things, but they were basically just like a bulletin board system. You just log in and use that stuff. It didn't really go out to the internet. There was a lot of semi-private networks back then, like the one that used to be used for a lot of the cable companies called At Home Network. And when you logged in, At Home Network was the homepage of the internet that you went to, and they had their own stuff. Like they had their own little shows and their own stuff you used to go to, like your own little community boards and your own games that they had pre-made, and they would run their own ads on it. You wouldn't really go out to the internet from there. It was really uncommon for someone to have something like a blog. Like you had to be a serious writer to have a blog, right? So yeah, it was just a different time and place, and everyone thought that the internet at the time was going to be this is the new thing, right? It's like all the walls in the world are going to come crashing down. Everybody's going to be like a liberal democracy, and like everybody's going to have peace and happiness. We're going to learn that we're all the same at heart, and everybody still wants to hug the kids at night, and this is it, and the world's going to change. And the world definitely changed. Not all of it for the better, but I would think overall it's a net positive, but that's, kind of based on your opinion of how things have gone.
So as someone who must have read a lot of those articles about, oh, this internet thing is just like a temporary fascination, it's going to go away. I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah,
you must have read plenty
everybody
of those
said it's a
articles.
fad. It's a fad. Why would anybody want a home computer in their house? And, like, I remember Microsoft failing at phones. They're like, you know, no professional is going to use a phone that doesn't have a keyboard on it, right? Because if you're a professional person, you had a BlackBerry and they had a keyboard on it, like a physical
Yeah,
keyboard.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and there's no reason that any regular person would have a phone who's not like an executive or something. They used to make jokes on the internet all the time about if you had like a pager, like a beeper, they were like, you're a drug dealer or a prostitute if you have a beeper because nobody else needs one, right? Unless you're like a security guard or something.
So actually, you brought up something quite interesting. BlackBerry, a very Canadian invention. In India, it was a huge success among my friends. I was actually, one of the people going against the grain by choosing not to get a BlackBerry and
Right.
BlackBerry Messenger. So what was that like over here, seeing it become, a global force, but it kind of just started here? Is there a story there?
Yeah. You know what? I don't know that much about what happened with BlackBerry, mostly because I actually lived in the United States at that time.
Okay, okay,
And Blackberries were just kind of, everybody kind of cashed them in for iPhones. Like if you
okay.
were in business, the marketing of iPhone was that Apple was an innovator. They are the newest technology, and like only the smartest of the smart have Apple products, right? That was the idea. And they sold that feeling, right? And it basically took over. They did a bunch of other stuff behind the scenes. I don't want to get into the entire history of Apple, but I mean, it's the selling the feeling, right? The Disney sells the feeling that, we're all family, we all love each other, we all love our kids kind of thing. And Apple sells the feeling that you have cutting edge technology, and, you're a little bit better than everybody else. And I don't know if that's exactly what they're going for, but I mean, that's kind of the gist you get from a marketing perspective.
Like I've always used Apple as a bit of a temperature check, kind of. Well, now more than earlier, when like Samsung would often roll out the features first, but Apple would kind of wait until the features are really, really good. They let Samsung do a lot of the, oh, do people actually care about this? Do people care if the phone can fold? Do they care if this camera's crazy high resolution? So okay, they do. Now we'll put it in here. Like they let Samsung do all that innovation testing for them. Then they roll
Yeah,
out,
it's weird
this is a
that
polished
people
version.
don't know that, right? People just they assume that the Apple made the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And like in every single, like whenever there's a Verge release for the new iPhone, oh yeah, Samsung did this 2 years ago. Like, okay,
Right?
bro, read the comments underneath.
They're all like, all right, no one really cares. So, I mean, some people do, right? And you always have this sort of like the people who are the more technically savvy, who are the ones who look at like what are the actual features and what does this mean and what can I do with this now, and they're buying those features, getting new phones all the time. And I mean, personally, I'm more of a, and which might be funny for a marketing person, I know, but I'm like, what's the stuff I really need to use? And the last real phone feature that I wanted and needed to use was a 3D camera.
Oh,
And
okay.
that simulated 3D camera effect, I still have that phone. Like, the only reason I have a newer iPhone is that I have a US and a Canadian phone now, because I have one for my US company, one for my, personal use in Canada. So I have like an iPhone 11 or something, 12. I don't know what number it is, because I don't care, because there's nothing about it that changes my life in any way.
So for me, the big reason why I shifted from Android to iPhone was because the Portal app shut down. And Portal was how I would seamlessly transfer files, links, and everything from my Android phone to my Mac laptop. I've used Mac laptops for a very long time because
Right?
they have suited my needs really well. So the moment they discontinued the app, I'm like, this is now a 6-step workflow basically to get this done correctly,
Right?
juggling between different apps and an imperfect system. So this would just make a very seamless copy. Well, not 6 steps, a couple of steps, but it still felt like an infinite more than
You
I
should
needed.
make that app then.
Yeah. So that's kind of now what, they are like. I'm sure that app does exist now, but I'm a
Right?
little comfortable with the workflow. And I think that's kind of where they get you, right? The comfort of the workflow.
Yeah. It's a
And
switching cost, right?
exactly. It's a
There's
very low
effort.
switching cost.
Well, it's not as low as you would think, right? Because like now I gotta find not just that one app, right? It's all the other apps I use. I
I
need to
think the apps
reinstall.
exist kind of everywhere, right?
You got
And
to relog into everything. You got to transfer all your contacts. You got to transfer all your photos and your data and
but
your
with the
videos.
password manager, everything gets like one click, face scan, you're in, right? So they make it really easy to swap. And I think Android is fighting back by making it very easy to swap back because some of the phones are really cool. Like it's just that when you're in the ecosystem, you're in the ecosystem.
It is. You know what? My business partner, he buys like two phones a year. Like, he's like, I got the newest one. I don't like it because of XYZ. And then he buys whatever the next new one is. And, you know, I This may or may not be true, but I think that he just likes to have the newest phone.
Well, I do think, as someone who uses a lot of AI tools like you do, someone who's very keyed in, there's no substitute to trying it out, right?
Right.
And especially nowadays when it feels like tech is kind of getting away from us a little bit. If you're offline for a week, you feel like you're more than a week behind. How do you deal with the churn and this barrage of information?
Well, there's an issue now in the AI space that, let's say you're trying to keep up on AI, right? Just, and let's say not even all of the AI things. You're just going to try and keep up on chatbots, just chatbots. And you spend all of your time doing it, like a full-time job worth of time, 40 hours a week, just working on chatbots and researching them and everything and reading the science and seeing what's out there. You're still getting behind. More is being generated than you could possibly understand or know about. So no matter what you do, you're getting behind. And I don't mean that in a negative way, though, because you kind of got to pick your battles, right? Like, lots of people really love sports, but you can't possibly know everything about all sports that are going on everywhere in the world all the time. You just got to be like, you know what? I'm going to keep up with my football, soccer, whatever. Maybe my cricket game. I like to watch curling at the Olympics. You know, I don't need to keep up with everything, right? So you kind of already are choosing your battles anyway. Um, I think that I try to keep in my space, which would be like the small business marketing productivity kind of neighborhood. And when new versions of tools come out, I'm subscribed to the emails for those tools. So if, Hey Gen comes out with a new version, they're going to send me an email and it's going to say, hey, this week you can use this tool to do this thing. And so I can read it. I can go, do I care about it? Yes or no? Just kind of skim it, get on to the next thing. I do subscribe to a bunch of newsletters, some Substacks, stuff like that. I like the Neuron. It's a good kind of overview of what's happening in the AI space. Uh, SmarterX has the marketing AI newsletter and podcast. I like the This Day in AI podcast is really good. Uh, and Future Tools is a good one too that talks about AI tools specifically. And the other thing that I really like to do is uh, like something comes up, like I got to do something. And I currently don't have a tool that does that thing. I will just go start talking to the AI, or I'll start Googling or going to Bing or DuckDuckGo or whatever you like to use. And I just go, is there a tool that does X? And then I look through the options. I give them a quick scan, check the price. Is this something I can afford to do this task that I have to do? And then I'll test it out and see if it works. And the first time when you test out the software to see if it fixes the problem that you have, it takes more time than it would have to do it anyway. But in like the manufacturing world, one of the things that I was told by a guy who wrote a book about, additive manufacturing, he said if it takes 40 times as long to train someone to do a task than it takes you to do it, it's still worth it. That's like the cutoff. It's like 40x. So if it takes me 4 times or 5 times as long to go find a tool and try it out, and maybe try out a different one and fix the task that I have, but now I've saved half of that time forever, that's a good investment. What happens is you end up with a ton of tools, which in itself can also become its own problem because you got to keep track of them. You got to know, what am I paying for? Am I using it enough, for the cost to justify it? But also, I think the next step after you have a bunch of tools that you can use to do things is how can I automate the use of those tools? Whereas I just need to check the input or the output or both, and I don't need to be involved in the minutia of what happens.
Okay. Yeah, that's This sounds like something you've picked up over the last few years. Like you've had a business for a while, and this seems like a very hyper modern way of running and scaling things. So, what's your process been like, and like learning the new mentalities with the changing of the times? Because this seems to be, you know, exactly like what's being preached right now when it comes to like how we do business operations. So, what's that process like? How do you figure these slightly more abstract ways of operating out? And especially what works for you and how it works for you.
I think one of the biggest problems that most businesses have with like automating anything in their business was that there has to be like a decision point in the process. And for a lot of companies, that also might include something like an approval process. So now you're getting into really complex workflows where it's like, okay, well, I got to get the input together. I got to make sure I got all the security I need to be able to get the data that I need. Then I got to do some sort of processing. Then I got to check the output. Then I got to get an approval. Then I got to do whatever the output is, the final output is. It turns into a lot of steps, a lot of connecting things. It can be, now you got to talk to IT. You got to right. There's these steps that are involved. But I think now with modern AI tools, like we use N8N a lot. We have a self-hosted N8N inside of our web hosting environment so that we can use it with our own tools internally without exposing any of that to the outside world. So it's very secure. And then we can connect it up to our internal systems as we need to. And we can say, okay, if we have this data that we need to process, we need to go through and make some decisions and then have an output and send the output to the right people in the company. Building that is, a 5 or 6 hour job now, and it used to be a 50-hour job. Right. And I think that there's also, once you get in and you really start automating things in your business, you start to see the wheels start to turn and you go, oh, you know what would be great if I could automate this thing that I have to do all the time that's a pain in the ass. And a good example of this is we write articles for a company and, we post those articles. We don't really use AI to write them because it's a very specific subject. AI doesn't know enough about it to, be useful in that way. We might use it for some drafting and stuff, but we pretty much are just writing it, old school writing. And then we post it. But then we got to take that article and I got to post it post on Twitter and Blue Sky and all these threads and whatever else. So all I'm really doing is summarizing the article, grabbing the link, grabbing the photo, and putting those into, posting software or whatever. So instead, I just use the automation tool. The automation tool checks every few hours to see if a blog's been posted on that website. And if it has, it automatically summarizes it, automatically grabs the photo and the link, puts it in the right length and format, and posts it to each of those platforms. And there's no human involved in that task. But it's still human content. We wrote it, right? So we're not using the AI to do the creation. We're having it do kind of the legwork after the fact. I cannot tell you how much time some of these things save because I don't have a way to properly measure it. It's just something that used to take us, several hours that now we don't do.
So this seems to be like the demands on us at work are kind of going up, and you need AI to sort of take, some of the repetitive, I like calling the donkey work off. And this seems to be like a hallmark of running your own shop in 2026. So could you tell us a little bit more about, the challenges of running a business today versus 10 years ago? What did you have to learn when it comes to new tools, new workflows, new ways of kind of understanding the environment? Because you're very hands-on, you've been a business owner for a while, you've seen this change. So if someone was starting up today within the marketing space, but are being advised by someone who started 10 years ago, what sort of information would you contrast with what they're, the sort of advice they're getting now with the reality on the ground today?
I think people would vastly underestimate how many people are running their business on paper still. And even if they do have, they've started to kind of digitize their business, they're probably still at the spreadsheets and maybe a CRM stage, right? Especially small businesses and especially trades businesses. Because the person who's running the business knows how to do the thing that, they're the stump grinder, they're the plumber, they're the electrician, they're whatever. They know how to do the thing. They get so busy, they got to hire somebody to help them. Then they got to hire another crew because they got too much business coming in. Their success, they got to have somebody working in the office, the admin who's answering the phones, and, he or she's got to, check the email and do all the stuff. They never sat down and said, like, how do I use modern tools to automate or anything like that? Like, it's not even on their radar, right? What's on their radar is, I got 26 hours of jobs to do and I got 23 hours of work time this week left. How am I going to do the other 3 hours of crap I got left to do? Or 2 customers haven't paid me. How am I going to make payroll? These are the things that they're worried about. So I think the first thing is probably getting someone to come in to do some consulting work and say, how can we modernize the way that we're handling the back end of the business? And that also can include your marketing, right? An easy shortcut, not to be kind of self-serving on it, but hire an agency who already knows how to do the thing, right? How many times, I can't even tell you how many times I've talked to someone and they said, I tried to run Google ads myself and I spent a bunch of money and I got no leads. And then, however many months or years later, they're coming to us and saying, can you help us out with advertising? And the fact is that these are not simple tools, even though Google is going to tell you they're simple, right? Or Meta or whoever it is. They're like, just come in and put your credit card in and use this thing and we'll get you some leads. And these tools have, in some cases, thousands of options. If you click the wrong button, it's super easy to melt your credit card, right? Or to just throw your money in the trash because you didn't notice that it was, defaulted to Oregon, but your business only works in Ohio. There's all kinds of stupid stuff that happens. I think another thing that you could do is, if you are in a, semi-technical business or even a tech business period, there is the idea that because you know technology and you can understand how to set up and run a marketing tool, that you understand how marketing works. And that is also generally not the case. Because you are, in a lot of cases, your subject matter expertise makes you different than the people you serve, right? So this is the oldest version of that saying is, you're not your customer. So, like, I 100% am not my customer. Even if my customer is businesses, right? They are, generally speaking, not technical. They don't know how to log into a server or set up Plesk or WordPress or something. They don't even know what GitHub is. All of this kind of stuff is completely foreign to them. And so I can't do marketing for them when their customers might be your average consumer, and think that that person is going to respond to the same things that I would respond to. And it's just not the same. And there's also another thing that happens. This happens really commonly in businesses who are trying to do their own marketing, is the curse of knowledge, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, I need you to dumb this down to people who don't know about it. And the kind of least complicated way you can get to, it's 5 out of 10, and your customer's at a 2 out of 10. So there's this gap of understanding, or a gap in language. So that could be, I'm not talking about one person speaks English and one person speaks French. It's like you speak Web3 and your customer doesn't understand anything about how just regular internet works. Like the complete gap of understanding is like the fiber is broken down the street from their house, but all they know is that the Wi-Fi doesn't work on their phone. And, you're trying to explain to them how distributed ledgers work.
Yeah, yeah. That language asymmetry is a huge part of what irks me about the way we talk about our Web3 products, because if you do not know what the product is by looking at the hero heading, you're not marketing it right. And so many companies still don't get that right in Web3. So yeah, that makes perfect sense what you're saying.
Web3 has always had a terrible marketing problem.
Yeah.
And you know what the worst part of the marketing problem is? Why would somebody use this thing? Is the only thing that should be at the top of their website or their talk or whatever it is they're doing. And what they're always doing is explaining why this technology matters from a technical standpoint and not why would I use it, right?
Yeah.
And the old, the saying, the kind of smoke signal, right, that you want to put up is like, if you're a chiropractor, right, my buddy Dr. Mike used to say this all the time years ago. He'd be like, if somebody goes like this and they're holding their neck, give them my card. That's it, right? That's the symptom. My neck hurts, my back hurts, my knee hurts. Give them his card, right? And I'm not saying, anything about chiropractic care or anything like that. I'm just saying this is a good example of, a smoke signal you can throw up, for your business. Like good one for me, for our company is the company says, oh, we tried out Google Ads, it didn't work. Good chance that it wasn't done correctly, right? But I go to a Web3 site for something and they're like, we use distributed or DeFi technology to, on the blockchain to fix the problems of this and this and this and this. And, I understand quite a bit about blockchain and I still don't know what they're trying to do. The consumer has no chance whatsoever, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I followed this news article, H1 Gallery, and it takes like the best H1s, the best title text from a bunch of websites all over the internet, and it just kind of showcases it. It editorializes it slightly, but talking about what they like about it. But in general, it just shows that simplicity is just the best way to cut through all that noise. Tells the customer why is this important, and then from then it's their decision to make. Them getting them to the website was hard enough. You don't want to lose them by making them have to decipher a whole bunch of nonsense. Like just easily explain. So yeah, that's a great set of pointers you've given us there, Matt. But I would like to talk to you about your podcast.
Sure.
200 plus episodes. I've been on your podcast twice, and I think it's something you obviously enjoy doing, but it also has massive like downstream effects for you as a business owner, as someone who's branding yourself, branding your services. So could you talk to me about the elevator pitch about your podcast, but sort of how it fits into your stack of activities?
Sure. So our podcast is Digital Marketing Masters. Released episode 280 today, season 8. So we've been going 8 years. It's more of a kind of labor of love thing, than really like it wasn't really started so much as like we're going to generate so much money from this kind of thing. It started out, I was like, I want to get my clients together with us in a room and we're going to chat and, people want to listen to it, because they want to hear conversations with business people, right? And, pre-COVID, that was the thing. And it was fun, but really it was, we're just going to connect and chat with our clients. Nobody's inviting anyone on a podcast in, like 2018, who's like a defense attorney in Beaverton, like it's just, you're just not going on shows, right? Actually, and this is kind of a funny aside, but we used to record at a music school. The reason we recorded at music school is all the kids are in school during the day, so you can rent the studio time for nothing. Like we were paying $30 an hour for a full recording studio. It's crazy. So anyway, hit up your local music school. I think that when we went remote, right, because it was COVID time, was a good change for us anyway. But also I started doing episodes 5 a week during COVID,
Wow.
right? And then I went back to 3 a week because I was like, crap, I don't have time to get my work done. But it's now we just do weekly, and May Econom is my co-host now for the show, who you also know, because she's from Toronto. It's kind of evolved over the years, but I think the interesting thing that I found with the podcast, and probably the most valuable thing, was I would pick guests that I wanted to learn from, and then I would just ask them what I want to know. This seems like something that anybody could figure out, but no one seems to know this thing. You can just take smart people, invite them on your show, and then they will tell you smart things. And, I did that for a long time, and I still do that now, but I've kind of started to shift a little bit in the podcast that I just kind of want to interview people I find interesting. And, like you're on my show. I had Sabrina, who was also, another Toronto PodCamp alumni on, talking about spirituality and AI, which is, I'm not, like, nobody's coming to me for spiritual advice, right? Yeah, they're like, oh, atheist computer guy. Yeah, definitely spiritual advisor of the year. But yeah, like I wanted to get more people on and kind of vary my topics from marketing a bit, but also keep it in the AI world because obviously I do a lot of work in that world. And it kind of also gives us a bit of like a temperature check on where people are with AI. Because everybody seems to understand at least a bit about how AI is affecting their industry or their vertical, that they work in. But I don't think they really understand where it's coming from in other industries. And I think a wide breadth of knowledge of just generally what's happening in the AI world is going to give you a lot of value and perspective of how do I need to think about the future of my business. And that could be your employment, could be your work, right? But and that also, talking about the podcast downstream effects, the way that our podcast makes money, which it does, it actually probably makes more money than most podcasts. And we don't have any advertising or anything. It's because when I meet people and we talk and we have a conversation, we get to know each other. And then when they have people that they know that have an issue that we can solve, they refer them to us. And like we've got probably 3-4 customers that have been with us that I met as referrals from people who were on season 1 of our podcast 8 years ago. So that means tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years of revenue just from the first season of the podcast. We've been going 8 seasons. So, but let me come around for a second because I think this is important. When you start to think about how AI is affecting other industries, and you kind of, like I was saying, you get kind of a wider breadth of knowledge, you start to see all the things where your blind spots are. The number one blind spot that I find that people right now have that I talk to is robots. And nobody understands how quick robots are advancing. Like, I saw somebody yesterday post that old meme from like a couple years ago that was like, I want robots to, make my bed and do my laundry or do my dishes, not make my images and write my stories or whatever. And then the post right next to it was an advertisement from a robot store, and the video was a robot doing dishes. So like the person's posting, I want a robot that does dishes, and then right next to it is an advertisement with a robot doing dishes in it, right? We've come so far so fast that people don't know that the thing that they're complaining about already exists. And robots are not an exponential technology. They're a bi-exponential technology, meaning they're twice exponent, right? So because robotics is exponentially increasing, and IRL training is exponentially increasing, and generative AI is exponentially increasing, and then all of those are combined into the robot. So it ends up being, I don't know if it's exactly twice exponent. I think if I had to estimate, I'd say it's like, 2.5 times versus double, but it's still a lot. Considering AI is doubling roughly, depends how you measure it, how you measure that productivity gain, but it's anywhere from 6.7 to 7 months. So, it's by the end of the year, then we're already going to be beyond one more iteration, if not two.
And this ties back into keeping up with it all, right? It's all moving so fast. Even picking your lane isn't working. It's just about trying to be present. Not to sound spiritual about
Well,
it
I
all,
think
but
you
if you
also
got
want to think about it, right? Like,
yeah.
Sit and think, what does this mean?
Mm.
And I know that's a tough thing to do because we're in a world where you're like staring at your phone all the time if you're not working at your computer or driving,
Mm-hmm.
But if you put all the crap away and you just spend some time and think about what it means for your business, that I think one really good thing would be, and this, I do this constantly. If I had a magic wand and I got to get done something, what would the magic version of this being done look like? Right? Like if I wave my magic wand and this is completed, what does that look like? And then I try to reverse engineer that using an AI system or combining it with, AI and automation and algorithms and scripts and whatever I need to do. But can I make it so I wave my magic wand and the thing gets done? It does, right? I think another thing that you need to think about also, especially if you're an entrepreneur right now, is what I call the rocket ship problem. And that is, if I had a rocket ship and it's going to take 100 years to get to the closest, solar system, but 20 years later, there's a better rocket ship engine, and it's only going to take 40 years to get to the other planet, it still gets there 40 years before the first one. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the problems with AI is that designing something to use this AI that currently works now without thinking about the next one is the next one's probably already going to be able to solve whatever problem you have with that task if you just wait to do the next one. But I'm not saying you should wait. I'm saying you should try to fix the task or automate it or do whatever it is that you need to do. Try to get that done with the existing AI. And if it's problems, it doesn't work quite right, it's not all the way there, you should build it anyway, because then you're going to be able to swap in the better AI a few months down the road.
Nice, yeah. That's some great advice. Because you know what it works. So you know what works, you know what you want out of it, you know its limitations, so you know exactly where to search for your improvement. So, Matt, this has been incredible. Honestly, there isn't enough time for me to ask you questions because I really enjoy chatting with you and I really enjoy all your insights. Like the whole nostalgia section of this, I could have gone on for hours. This whole AI and productivity section, I could have gone on for hours as well. But yeah, would love to have you on again because this has been incredibly insightful. I appreciate you taking out the time for this. So before we end though, we can first start by telling us, where can the folks at home find you? How can they get involved with the work that you do? How can they read? Because your Substack as well, I think, deserves a shout out. It's been quite a good read. And of course, your podcast as well. So where could the folks at home keep up with their activities?
Yeah, you can find me at MatthewRouse.com, which is Matthew with 2 T's and ROUSE. I'm Matt Rouse on LinkedIn, Matt Rouse on Substack. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. You could type it into your favorite AI chatbot. If it tells you it's the AI chicken wrangler, then I'm your guy. And that's about it. And if I had any kind of words of wisdom is don't get caught up in the hype of this or that, one side or the other. It's not a two-sided equation. Just figure out what the things that you need to get done that are going to make a difference in your business or make a difference in your life, and then go and try and find a way, or search around, see if somebody's already figured out a way to use the AI to do that thing, and then do that thing. You don't need anybody's permission, just unless you're using your company data. But you don't need permission to figure this stuff out. And especially if you work for a large organization, it is only going to make you more valuable to the organization if you know how to use some AI tools. Just play with it, mess with it, figure it out. That's the best way to do it. And don't forget that if you're talking to a chatbot that knows pretty much everything in the world, you can always ask it how to get better at using it.
Fantastic. Matt, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Marv.
So on that note, from rainy Toronto and from
sunny Nova Scotia,
we say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining and listening in. You take care, and we will catch you on the next one. Ciao. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate all ratings, thumbs up, shares on whichever platform that you're listening to this. Don't forget to subscribe if you're on YouTube. Those subscriptions really, really help with the visibility of my channel. If you like this, then I think you're going to love my Substack, because I get into more detail on things. I try to publish as frequently as I can because there's just so much happening online. I won't promise to have all the answers, but what I can do is promise that I can show you the journey that we're going on so you can reach your own conclusions. There's plenty more episodes where this came from, so enjoy. Catch you on the next one. Cheers.